Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. Oh, it's been a while. I can hear a little echo. Hopefully that's not too loud for you. Yeah, it's been a while. Hi there. My name's Tony. Welcome back to Star Trek New Worlds. Yeah. If you're new here, thank you for joining us on this wonderful Saturday at 11 o'clock Pacific time. This is a live stream that we give to you playing the... let's try that again. What is Star Trek New Worlds? Star Trek New Worlds is a turn-based strategy game that we play here on live for you. So we play it using the rules of the Federation Empire as published by the Amarillo Design Bureau on a platform called Vassal. We stream it to you live today on YouTube and Twitch, but not so much Facebook. It didn't want to play nice today. So, despite some technical issues and some constraints and yada, 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 and stuff you don't want to hear about, we are live again after a little bit of a break. So, let's give you a quick update on what's going on and what we're going to be talking about today. So today, we're going to be introducing you to Into the Void. Into the Void is our latest and greatest campaign here on Star Trek New Worlds. And that's why that's doing that. Sorry, I'm just hearing that echo in the background. Okay, yeah, so Star Trek New Worlds. And Into the Void is our latest and greatest campaign. We are just sort of starting off with a couple of turns, and I will show you some of our factions that we are playing. Some of the things that you will see in the upcoming turn is some new features and sort of better or different visuals associated with Vassal. In many of the episodes that you've seen up to now, you have seen us go over the map, and you know, the color palette and various other things are pretty basic. And I mean, that's some of the limitations of the platform that we use to be able to play this game, Vassal. But there's a lot of stuff that Vassal can do that we are starting to explore and sort of mapping out. So there's that piece. And then, of course, there are the different factions in the game. We're going to start talking about some of those. Why are we talking about Into the Void? Well, Into the Void is, like I said, our latest campaign that we started earlier this summer. It takes a little while for players to sort of like get up to speed and flesh things out. So there wasn't really anything to tell you until maybe about now. And then, of course, number two, the Star Trek New Worlds campaign is still in full effect and stereo sound. But our wonderful game master has recently taken vacation and has been sort of incommunicado for a while, which is perfectly fine because after all, we all need a break. So in the support of that and giving us an opportunity to be able to talk about Into the Void, today we will be talking about Into the Void. So without further ado, let me kind of stroll into the Void. And we're going to start off with one of the alternate factions that you're going to see here, and we'll slide right in here. So a couple of things to note. We have some different color palettes for some of these players, and some of these players, all of the players I'm going to show you today are not connected in the sense of when we start these early campaigns, everyone's sort of in their own island. The island is sort of their own little map, and until they bump into their neighbors, no one's connected. Once everyone's connected, we're good to go. And so, yeah, we're just not there yet when it comes to all the players bumping into each other in these very early turns. If you may recall in the Star Trek New Worlds campaign, I was showing you basically the Klingon map before bumping into most of the other players. And then we got some permission from some of the other players to show their maps as well. And I started showing you where they were. But the big question was, where on the map were you? Because you could see where you were on that big hexagonal shaped map, where you were relative to sort of like the center of the universe, but you can tell where anyone else was. In this game, the GM has done a slightly different thing, meaning that everyone exists on their own unique map. And whatever the numbers that you're going to see here that identify each hex are going to be... don't pay much attention to those in the sense that they're not going to be related to the big map once everyone starts to bump into each other. Again, everyone's sort of in their own little island until they start bumping into their neighbors. And once they start bumping into their neighbors, then we're going to start start to see some of this stuff flesh out. So we'll see how that goes as we go forward. Now, this is one of our the first faction we're going to talk about today. So a couple things to note. This player, as I understand it, based on the information that I've been given about this turn, because of course, you know, we're not sharing all the different maps and we're not all in sync as of yet. This player is at turn 8, and this player is, you might be able to guess, is the alternate faction to the Federation. So in this game, we've introduced some alternate factions in the sense of, like, the Federation are traditionally blue, and you can see that here with the crippled J.R.R. frigate. Now, the J.R.R. frigate is, as you can see, it's the crippled side is blue, but we've created an alternate color palette for sort of a second player to play Fed factions. And so that's the orange that you're seeing here and now. So, for example, if I were to pick this, and I think if I were to flip it, yeah, see, you can see that it's orange. So what ends up happening is the back end of this map, I guess there's some things that we need to tweak just to be able to sort of correct some of these bugs as we're improving and applying changes to the module. And that stuff is working within our community in the sense of we have folks sort of working on that piece, but that doesn't stop us from being able to play the game. So let's start off where this person's at. This person who's playing the alternate Federation is at turn 8. So let's do a quick little tie-in, and the where everything is a little different on the menu because we're dealing with a slightly different module. So disregard most of the other players here. So this is Federation number 2. You can see here. So they have 18.5 as their income. Now, why is that? Well, if we go to Fed 2 capital, you'll see a couple little differences in how the capitals are spread out. So in this game, you can see that this person has a home system or home capital planet. That is a 10 EP by default planet. And then, of course, when you have Happy Plus, it bumps that up a little bit. We have a developing planet here, which is the circle with the square. We have a colony, which is the half circle with the square, or the little dot, I should say. And then a number of different colonies here. So we've got a developing, and then 4 different colonies, and then the capital planet. You can see that they've got a YBS on their capital, 2 planetary ground bases scattered between the main and the developing planet. And then, of course, they have a diplomat there. And I would imagine that diplomat is working to improve the attitude of the different planets involved. So that's great. Let's take a look. We've got a slightly different format for how fleets are laid out, which is interesting. So we've got the exploration and auxiliary fleets, it would seem here. So let's look up the exploration fleets first, which there's nothing there. Okay. Well, let's see here, shall we? Nope, that's not that. Okay. The layout is a little different, so you'll have to excuse me as I fumble through. Okay. So here we go. So much like in the Star Trek New Worlds campaign, where we had, for example, for the ISC, we had these fleet lists like this. We added this for some of the other factions. So you can see here, we've got 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and goes all the way to 9th exploration fleet. And we can see those tied in here. We've also got auxiliary fleets. So let's see if I can find that too. Auxiliary fleets. There we go. So as we can see here, slight little sort of color palette different. This is just a bug on the back end. So the Fed 2 exploration fleets are blue instead of the orange, which is their normal palette color. So easy and quick fix, relatively speaking. But we can see here that for the exploration fleets, we can see 1st, 3rd, 7th, and then 3rd and 4th there. So 3rd and 4th, you can see we have a J.R.R. survey cruiser, and 4th is a J.R.R. cruiser with an escort frigate, and both with prime teams. They're sitting here on this herd, and we'll talk about that in a second. Based on turn 8, we can see that, of course, they got 18.5 EP, and they're exploring out as we go. If we take away the ships real quick, whoops, wrong button. Where are you? Ships. There we are. We take away the ships. You can see this is the amount of space that they've explored. They've got their capital system here in the center. They've got a couple north and one to the northeast, we'll call it. And then down south here. Now this is a partial resource. So in the past, we have full resources, which are 1 EP, and then half resources, which are 0.5 EP. Whereas in New Worlds, for example, we have just resources and then planets. So in this game, there is another sort of a resource you can get, and that's a 0.5 resource. So this is an example of the 0.5 resource. So yes, we can see here a sort of a challenging, based on turn 8, a challenging bit of exploration. And if we bring the ships back, you can see that they are currently dealing with a monster, which is sort of labeled here as the Herd. We've got the survey cruiser, a W-era cruiser, a frigate, and a W-era destroyer you can see there in the stack that is also attacking there. And they've got 6 fleet, which I don't know, we'll call it battle fleets maybe? No. Where will we find numbered fleets? 6 fleet. Okay. So the attempt was to try and make this easy, so we'll see. So 6 fleet you can see is also a WCA with an escort frigate. So we've got 2 cruisers, 2 frigates, a destroyer in that hex dealing with this particular herd. And then of course the combination of auxiliary and exploration fleets. This player has decided to put exploration. Oh no, that's an assault. Oh, interesting. Okay. So this is in the Aux fleet, we have a Y convoy, so a support, like extend supply kind of thing. And then an assault frigate. So this is a small Y-era freighter that is an A, which would mean it's an auxiliary warship. So it's got half an attack factor, which is this little chevron here, and then a 2 defense. So that's interesting. As a minor, sort of a small assault freighter, essentially, and it's got a half an attack, and 2 defense factors. So interesting. It's obviously running escort for the convoy. Interesting. Okay, so this is what's so neat for me as a player looking at this, is that it's a different combination of playstyles and unit types that I haven't really seen used before. So it's really interesting to see that going forward. I can see that there's chatter going like crazy here. I'll go to the chat once I'm done sort of looking over this turn a little bit. And of course, on the homeworld, we can see that there are 2 of these W-era frigates that got crippled. Hence, with the bug, that's why they're blue. And they're on the homeworld probably because they're going to get repaired by that YBS. And away we go. So that's kind of interesting. We can see that this player at turn 8 has had sort of this level of success. They've explored essentially a total of 2, 4, 5 hexes, and they've encountered a monster, and they're dealing with that. So very, very interesting. Let's take a second and run into the chat real quick here. For those of you, again, who has followed us after my fumble intro, thank you so much for staying with us. If you are so inclined and would be interested in supporting us, thank you so much. Coffee is our beverage of choice, and you can see that with the QR code right beside me, the link down below. You can send us a coffee to be able to help if you like what we're doing and you want to keep us doing it, then feel free to send a coffee our way, either a one-time or you can join us as part of our community here on the Discord channel. And if you've seen any of the other videos around this, you know that there's an alert that will go up. Fire a disruptor bolt. If you do so during the live stream, you'll see that fire up. And of course, if you join us as part of our continuing community at the I'm forgetting the name of the tier, but basically coffee and Discord channel. You can support us and join us on our Discord and join our community as we discuss, chat, and role play and do all the various things as we go. But let's jump into the chat real quick. It's been a while since we've had a chat, so let's start off with Jim. Forces from without face forces from within, and players are the pawns of the grand battlefield presented. Interesting. Jim, by the way, is the Hydrogen player in the New Worlds campaign, the GM for Into the Void. Eugene, The first look of Into the Void. By the way, Eugene, our classic public affairs officer, our press agent, the person who does all, it would seem, the publicity in the chat. Thank you, Eugene, for your continued efforts. Eugene, the first look of Into the Void. What have all the players encountered? How far have they explored? And what have the dwarves been doing? I hear that they have had an exploration ship pirated by Orions. Then, question mark? Yeah, we'll have to see what that's all about. I will show you that as we go. All right. So what else we got here? We've got Bill's in the house, Jim, Eugene. Big Slow Target has arrived. Nice to have something Starfleet related to watch on Saturday morning. Well, that's what we're here to do. Support you in your Star Trek addiction. Every day, all the time, right here. Don't be shy. Bill Linton is in the house. Small arm fritter. Yes, thank you. Brain fart / haven't seen it in a while. Big Slow Target. Yeah, got some YFAS in starting fleets. At least some did. What do we got? Eugene, there was an Orion base there that had taken the space sheep hostage. Ooh, I had to battle. So Eugene is obviously the alternate feds here. I had to battle the Orions to free the sheep. The sheep should be worth about 11.25 EP. Hey, that's interesting. Okay, so Eugene, you'll have to tell us, and or Jim, you'll have to tell us about how that works when it comes to herding the sheep and sort of working that piece as you go forward. Very interested to see and sort of hear how that evolves. But very interesting that you're what's the word? Very Federation of you to go liberate the sheep from the Orion pirates. Very, very interesting. Okay, Jim, everyone got one WR frigate and 3 YFASs and a YFEL. YFAS, again, Y-era, freighter, assault, assault ship. So let me try that again. Y-era, freighter, the S at the very end is small, and the A is for the assault. So that's what that is. And whereas the YFEL, boom, ladies and gentlemen, we have received a coffee. And as you can see on the bottom there is a progression bar moving across. So it would seem that a coffee has been fired by You Can't Be Petty. Thank you, You Can't Be Petty, for the support, the disruptor fire your way. Thank you. I will take a sip. Thank you very much. By the way, I forgot to mention this with the sort of the fumbling and me getting back into the groove here. Thank you very much for all of you who are subscribers on the channel, like Devin Dean at the bottom there. We saw in August a little spurt at the very end to sort of drive us toward our current number, which I believe is 273 is our current subscriber count. And we're on the path to 500. 500 is the magic number that unlocks the community tab, which allows us to be able to just put up more and different kinds of content for you on YouTube. To help engage with the community. Things like polls and questions and things like that. We can like sort of engage you more actively in that respect. So thank you so much for your support. If you would, if you like what we're doing here and want to sort of help us get towards that 500 number, please feel free to contribute and hit the subscribe button. Don't be shy. All right, so Jim, there was a lot of great role playing about the sheep from Eugene. Great fun. Woohoo! Yes, excellent. Awesome. Okay, well, speaking of, so Eugene, how are you finding playing the feds? The early era feds can be, they have great cruisers, and they can be good on exploration with the exploration ships. But you let me know when you look at the MSIT and sort of the MSIT being the master ship information table, or I call it the shopping list of what you get and when you get it. What do you think about that shopping list, and what do you like about what you see? Let's take a moment and slide into our alternate Gorn faction on the map. So you can see here, first things first, whoa, look at them colors. Yeah, so this is the alternate Gorn faction. You can see them in a teal kind of blue and black. Very sharp on my screen anyway, but I've got the contrast turned up. So, yeah, very, very interesting. Let me get rid of that. There we go. Okay. I know what I'm trying to do here is... So I can just hear that audio, and I want to mute it in my earphones so that I can't hear it. I'll have to sort that out later. All right. So as we look at the alternate Gorns here, you can see that they are... Oh, let's take away... Well, let's look at their EP first. I have to get used to where the EP button is on this one. So Gorn 2, they are at 17.5. So 17.5 EP relative to the 18.5 of the Federation. Interesting to note that this is the Gorn at turn 5. So they're at turn 5 versus turn 8. So interesting to note that difference. I mean, the Federation had to, it would seem, attack and destroy an Orion base. So that kind of takes up your time and attention and your resources. Whereas the Gorn here at this stage in the game, if you look, they've explored basically the same, more numbers, more hexes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so they've explored more hexes and discovered slightly more resources. That's just the sort of the luck of the rolls, so to speak. You've got a half resource here, it looks like, and then a colony up here. So a 1.5 EP boost to their normal EP, which we will see here. You can see the same distribution as we saw with the Federation: capital, developing planet, and then a bunch of colonies. So they're at turn 5, 3 turns behind where the Federation were that we saw. They're very close, within 1 EP of each other, which is great. We've got a bunch of exploration fleets, so let's pull up the exploration. Oh, goodness. G2 exploration? No. G2 exploration fleets. Okay. I gotta say, I really like this color. It pops. Yeah, I like it. Okay, so we can see that essentially all of these exploration fleets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, I should say, they are all an exploration freighter with an escort. So the large exploration freighters have one of those assault freighters with them. One of the small ones does as well. And then, of course, we have a J.R.R. frigate, which is, I think that's a frigate leader, technically, the FL, or maybe it's frigate light, not sure. But either way, the Gorn have terrible ships in W, and this would be an example of a 1-2. Not the greatest frigate in the world, but nonetheless, they've got this spread here of exploration ships going and doing their thing. And then, of course, you can see there is one YFES sort of all on its own. Important to note, what looks like, the survey vessel here, no attack factor on it, but it's off doing its own thing, and it, of course, discovered the colony in the sort of northwest, I'll call it. So very, very interesting to see. Now, I'll be interested to know if the Gorn player has experienced or encountered any opposition. It would seem, based on their fleet disposition and that there are no sort of bad guys there, or any crippled ships that they haven't yet. We can take a quick look at their fleet cap. You can see the Gorn have 4 attack factor, 26 defense, and a total of 26 fleet cap, so not very much. Let me take a quick run back to the Federation. We didn't do their fleet cap. Let's just do that real quick here. You can see 10 ship equivalents with a 20-41 split, 20 attack. I'll just move this over to the side of it. There we go. 20-41 attack with 43 fleet cap. That's represented by their crippled ships. Interesting to note that relative to the Gorn, which again, a 426 with 2 ship equivalents. So interesting. And so those 2 ship equivalents, when you think about it, those are the survey ship here and the WFL that they have as well. So those are those 2 ship equivalents. And of course, the Federation have more. So very interesting to see sort of that growth disposition. Again, this is turn 5 versus the turn 8 for the Feds. And of course, the Feds encountered the Orions and decided to beat up on them. All right, let's roll into turn 4 for the OG Gorns. So these are the OG original set Gorns. They're in turn 4, so one turn behind the black and blue folks. And very interesting to note, let's take away the ships real quick. You can see they have discovered somebody. This is what looks like, if I'm guessing, a minor faction, maybe barbarians. I know there was some discussion about barbarians and that the color for barbarians would be purple. Well, that's purple, and I've got a couple ground bases defending a YDK. That's very interesting. And as we come back here, we can see we have a WRR frigate. Ooh, ladies and gentlemen, another coffee has been fired by Geostorm. Yeah, Geostorm. Yeah, okay. Geostorm, thank you very much. I'm going to have to jump into the chat and find you there and say thank you very much for the caffeination. What's awesome about that, we are now 2/3 of the way to the goal being 3 coffees in a live stream. We're almost there. We'll get there, sure, in a second here. But let's talk about the Gorn. I'll finish off the Gorn, then we'll jump back in the chat. So we've got 3 expeditionary fleets, exploration fleets, thank you very much. Where we got here? Gorn exploration fleets. Boom. Okay, so let's slide this over. So we can see here very much the same as we saw before, exploration ships with the assault freighter escort. Interesting to note that the first exploration fleet does not have a escort. But you do have a W-era frigate that is sort of encountering this minor faction, maybe? We'll see. It's interesting because normally minor factions, or at least traditionally in previous games, they have a planet or something. And so I can see in the chat as it's going by that purple is the minor faction. But it's interesting that a minor faction would only be on a base station. So very interesting to sort of note that, because I don't see a planet there. I just see a YDK and 2 planetary ground bases. So very interesting to note. Interesting also that there are 2 planetary ground bases on a YDK. That seems like a lot for a YDK, but question mark. We'll have to see. So with that said, let's jump into the chitty chat and have a quick peruse as to what's going on. Okay, so we'll pick up after the first coffee. We've got Jim. There are a lot of great role playing about the sheep, which we talked about before we switched over. Eugene is playing the Terran Federation. The Terran Federation. So we're talking about humans as the Federation as opposed to the Vulcans or some other options there. Oops, bases and ground bases are missing, Jim says. Bases and ground bases are missing. For whom are you saying that, Jim? Are you saying that the bases and ground bases are missing for the Gorn or the Alt Gorn? And we'll have to talk about that. Eugene, this is my first time playing this game, so I don't really know how to compare the MSIT. I got survey ships fairly early, so that is great, but I find I envy the players with early tugs. Fact. So different factions that get different ships at different times. There's different introduction dates. So that is a flavor, shall we say, of each faction, and it's going to be different for, I mean, a lot of the factions can be similar, but there are certain factions that get things early, certain that get things late, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be very different. Experiencing the Gorn, I would argue the Gorn are can't talk. Take a moment, breathe, and out we go. The Gorn are a challenging faction to play because A, their ships are weak, they get things late. Yeah, they're just a challenging faction to play. So very interesting to see how this sort of pans out for you. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Okay. Lasers, Jim says. Lasers. In the sense that some factions in the early days don't have phasers, they have lasers. Okay, big slow target. No worries. We have superior fighting spirit. Fair. Gorns have an advantage in ground attack and certain marine assaults, which is something that comes from SFB, Starfleet Battles. Eugene, not an MSIT, but I find that the GM's dice throwing skills seem to be worn out by the time he gets to my exploration rules. Yeah. My exploration ships seem to sit, and then when they do find something... Yeah, I know it's true. Sometimes, depending on the sort of protocol or the methodology around dice rolling. For example, let's talk about this. So, in the very first games that I played, and I just had coffee of all things with the original, the OG GM, who plays the Tholians in New World's campaign, and we were talking about sort of different ways of doing things. So, for example, he uses a random dice roller or a random number generator for a lot of stuff that he does. He finds it faster. There's no sort of bias there or anything like that. Daniel, by example, who is the GM for New Worlds, really likes dice, and so he literally enjoys throwing dice and sort of rolling that out, which is, I think, is great, but it can introduce some different sort of trends when it comes to numbers that come up. So that's interesting. I have no idea what Jim does when it comes to how he does this. Does he roll the dice? Does he use a random? Does he use a random number generator? A random number generator to do that? There's all sorts of options there. So all that to say, yeah, sometimes it's bad luck. Sometimes it's bad throwing of dice. Who knows? But either way, it's interesting. Of course, the fun of when you play this stuff in person is that you're literally throwing the dice yourself, so you have some kind of impact on that. But yeah, no, interesting to see. We'll see. All right, big slow target, and that looks a lot like end of turn 4 before move on turn 5. We've encountered 2 raiders but managed to fight them off without serious damage. Big slow target, are you the Gorn OGs? Is that what I'm talking? Is that what I'm seeing here? Big slow target is the OG Gorns, the red and white. Interesting. You've had to fight off 2 raiders already. Interesting. Oh, we jumped there. Is it a raider or pirate? And then Geostorm, boom, fire the coffee. Bill Linton says, all the miners are purple, it looks like. Yep, miners are all purple colored. It went boom. YFEL's YFAS escort, that is. Jim, Gorn 2. Yep, base is missing for Gorn 2. Okay, so base is missing for Gorn 2. Got it. George Forknall. Welcome, George. Thank you for joining us on the live stream. Love what you're doing. Happy to caffeinate. A longtime SFB, need to be part of future FNE, a.k.a. Geostorm. All right, Geostorm. Well, thank you again for the caffeine. And yeah, so once I talk about my Space Dwarves here in a moment, I'll go through all the other players, and then we'll talk about the Space Dwarves of the Iron Seed Coalition. We'll talk about those guys in a moment, but and the motivation, the rationale, and all that kind of stuff. And I will read you a little role play that I had around them to give you a little flavor of what they're like. So, with all that said, we have new campaigns on the sort of in development on the go. Some of the people in the chat here are interested in running campaigns, so we shall have to have a little discussion about that before the end of this live stream. Moving on to round out the chat for today, or for this little session. Jim says, we have another campaign brewing, George. Bill Linton, the GM of Edge of Nowhere, upcoming campaign. That's one of 2 that's brewing. So anyways, we'll discuss that. Jim says, I use dice, roll them together to generate the chance to explore and also the result if successful. Lord Lawless, Tony needs more coffee to energize those lips into forming words. Yeah, absolutely. Big slow target, Gorns 2. Oh, yeah. So you're G2s. G2s. Yeah, I like that. I am G2s, I mean. Okay. Let's roll into, speaking of the Gorn, let's roll into the next faction, which is the Paravian, or the Feathered Gorn, you might say. Whoa, ladies and gentlemen, a couple of interesting things to talk about here. First, these are the Paravians. I got a soft spot for the Paravians. In a previous campaign, I played the Paravians and saw them as more as like angels rather than like true like feathered raptors. So I saw them in the spirit of the Blood Angels Primarch. Why can't I remember his name? But anyways, they look like angels. So they were humanoid with wings out the back, and that's how I played my Paravians. As opposed to really in the Starfleet universe, they're really just feathered Gorn, feathered dinosaurs. And so that's what the deal is with these guys. So let's take a look at this map. First off, this is turn 7. So let's do the quick EP and fleet cap numbers here. So we can see here right off the top, the Paravians at turn 7 are at 19.5 EP. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, another coffee has arrived. Who sent that? Lord Lawless has fired a coffee our way. Thank you, Lord Lawless. Pleasure. Thank you very much. We have hit our goal for today. Thank you very much. Of course, don't feel free to send more coffee if you like. But 3 coffees was the goal today. We'll celebrate that goal. Thank you so much. Very excited about that. Okay, let's talk about the Paravians. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, Lord Lawless, you may be playing the Paravians. 19.5 EP at turn 7 puts them at the leader of the pack so far as what we've seen. We can see that their fleet cap with 6 ship equivalents at a 9 attack, 40 defense split with a total fleet cap of 40, which means they have no crippled ships in action. Let's look at what they got. Let's take away the ships real quick, and we can see, that they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hexes explored. Interesting. We can see that these 2 top resources here are full resources, 1 EP resources, and you can see the bottom one here is a 3 hex. It has 3 little dots versus the 6 up here, so that's a 0.5 resource. You'll notice the big sort of graphical difference with these resources versus New Worlds is that we've sort of cut the top off so you can see the hex number on the hex, so it makes it a little easier as opposed to having to let your cursor hover over the hex. But regardless, you can see here 1, 2, 3.5 EP on top of what they got in their home system. Let's take a quick look at the Paravian home system. Somewhere here, or there will be Paravians. There we are. Paravian capital. So we can see here, same as before. I'm going to guess, I'm going to go out on a limb here, that there are no bases. Or planetary ground bases listed here. As Jim had mentioned that with the previous Gorn player, I'm going to guess there should be some bases here, and there aren't right now. So I'm sure Jim will fix that as we go forward. But basically, as far as the capital goes, same. Capital, developing planet, and then the rest are colonies. So let's bring the ships back and see what we got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exploration fleets. Well. Let's look up the exploration fleets and see what we got. You can see here's an interesting difference, and you can see the sort of the delta, the difference of success in the exploration versus the Paravians versus some other factions. When we looked at all the other factions, they did not have prime teams embarked on their large exploration freighters, or at least we didn't see a lot of that. Here you can see every single one of the large exploration freighters, which are the only ones that can house a prime team, have a prime team on board. Now, one of the things about the rules here is, and of course, every GM has slight tweaks on the rules, but I believe it's the same in this campaign. I'm just not 100% up to speed on my Into the Void rule set. I believe that if you do not have an early era exploration ship, that you can put prime teams on large exploration freighters, which would be the case here. So if I believe the Gorn also have the Gorn do have an exploration cruise or survey ship. So at least in this case, so the large exploration freighter is something you put a prime team on, and that's probably my guess how they're so successful. So or at least it increases your chances. So you can see that's what's going on here, and then of course the small exploration freighters in the other fleets, and we've got 5 of them floating around. A wide convoy here, I'm going to guess, is going to move either up to the resource of the colony and build a base there, and go off and do stuff. Interesting to note here is one of the sort of terrain features that's added into this campaign versus some of the other campaigns. This little thing here is essentially a graphic to represent the Briar Patch. If you remember Star Trek Generations and, of course, the beginning of Voyager and elements of DS9, the Briar Patch is a sort of impassable area of space with basically something like an electromagnetic storm that prevents ships from going through without getting seriously damaged. So in this case, this terrain feature is basically an impassable area. It prevents ships from going through the Briar Patch. I would be interested to note, as something to think about for the future, what about a tech that would allow you to be able to navigate the Briar Patch? Maybe? Or some kind of process whereby you would have to invest time and energy to be able to navigate those those kinds of things. And maybe there's a limit on what can go through, like not a huge fleet, but rather a small number of ships, or who knows. But that would be interesting to note. But either way, it is a terrain feature that makes that impassable. And of course, these ships can't go through it. So interesting to note. We saw that their, of course, at turn 7, their economy right now is bigger than anybody else's. And you can see the total number of ships based on fleet cap. They're not, I mean, with 6 total ship equivalents and a 940 split, I mean, they don't have the biggest fleet because the Federation had a much more sizable attack factor, but that's not nothing. And with 6 ship equivalents, they're doing pretty well. So I would say the Paravian player is doing quite nicely, all things considered. Let's roll into, ooh, are these the Romulans? These look to be Romulan. Romulan turn 9. Ooh, interesting. Okay. So this is the Romulan turn 9. And interesting to note, so turn 9, this is the most advanced player turn-wise that we've come across so far. Notice the difference in the amount of space explored. Of course, a lot of that can be just the luck of the dice, but you can see here 1 resource discovered and a total of 5 hexes around the capital. Let's look up the Romulan capital before I go any further. Ooh, and here's another sort of graphical improvement. You can see we've got the Romulan logo there in the background. Very nice. I like that. So let's bring back ships, maybe bases? No, nothing. So again, no bases here. I imagine there probably are some. Generally speaking, we start off with a YBS on the homeworld, but same distribution of planets that you can see in the Romulan turn. And then, of course, we've got, let's look at their EP and fleet cap totals. We can see a total of 5 ship equivalents with a 10-26 split for the Romulans, and their income is, as we scroll through here, the Romulan OG is 17 total income. So they are not the lowest, they're not the highest, but they're sort of in the middle. But they are the furthest along as far as turns go. So at turn 9, they are actually, I think at 17 they are the lowest. I think as far as income goes. But let's take a look at their fleets. We've got a total of home and then 3 exploration fleets. Romulan exploration fleets, and then we'll pull up Romulan home fleet. There we are. All right, so what we can see here, if I move this to the side, so we can see they have 2, so this is an S era, which, so in the early years, we have the W and the Y. And in most cases, that's all we get. We get the W as the earliest ships, the golden era of space travel, sort of quasi-Enterprise-esque in the sense of like we get the Warp 5 capable ships, we go out and we explore and all that kind of stuff. The S era is the era before that. And in the context of Starfleet, the Starfleet universe, when most factions are in the W era, the Romulans are still at S, and then they start to catch up quickly. But and there's a whole thing about playing the Romulans that you basically have a delayed introduction of a lot of your ships because you're effectively behind everybody else, technologically speaking. So the S era ships start off and they're what's the term? They do not have tactical warp. So they can go to warp, but they can't like move effectively at warp speed, whereas other ships can. So basically, you've got S-era ships. So these are snipes, which are frigates. So S-era frigates with 2 of them in the home fleet. And then you can see here we've got an interesting combination. We've got S-era Kingbird, which is a command cruiser. So that's a cruiser. They would have built an S-era Warbird and then upgraded it to a command cruiser, which would have been, which is the Kingbird. And so they've put prime teams on their cruiser, which is great. There's a couple things about the Romulans that really make this potential strategy advantageous. One, if I'm reading the tea leaves right here, it looks like that the Romulan player is going to start building a whole bunch of cruisers and populating them with prime teams. I think that's a great strategy. 2, the reason why it's a great strategy for the Romulans is that their ships from the S era all the way up to GW are upgradable. Meaning I don't have to keep building new generations of ships every time I advance my technology. I just have to upgrade the ship. That's not the case for most factions. Most factions don't have that upgrade path. In fact, when every era advances, you essentially have to mothball or scrap those ships or use them in some way to be able to build, or have the capacity to be able to build other ships, because you only have so much fleet cap. So what's interesting about that is that the falter a little bit, and then they will grow. I'm noticing a little bit of a lag here on the stream. We are still streaming. There we are. Okay, so there was a little bit of a hiccup there on the YouTube side, but hopefully you're still with us. So yeah, basically what I was saying there was Romulans have a continuous upgrade path. If that's what they're doing, if they're taking that into consideration, it would seem as though, and I think this is a great strategy, that they are building cruisers, their biggest, baddest cruisers that they can build, and they're putting prime teams on them to be able to exponentially accelerate their exploration. So I think that's a great strategy. It means that they'll have a little bit less sort of time under the curve initially, but I think that's a great strategy. The only way to maybe tweak this, potentially, is to build the YFELs early. You can only build them once a year, but if you could build those up front and have those go out and do their exploration, then I think that'll help overall. That would be the only tweak I would say to that strategy. Build the YFELs first, send frigate snipes out to escort them, and then build the cruisers with prime teams. Make sure you put prime teams on those YFELs, assuming you don't have an exploration freighter or exploration cruiser or ship in the early era. If you do, then you can't. And I think you do. So I think it's YFELs and that's it, which is great, because then you can just populate the prime teams on cruisers and away you go. So that's a great strategy. I think they'll be fantastic for the Romulans. A slower start, but they'll really accelerate as they get going. You let me know in the comments what you think of that strategy. And of course, let's just take a minute and talk to our chat about that particular strategy. So let's see. Ooh, I see a bunch of numbers thrown up here. Okay, so Bill Linton says that he is the Paravians in ITV. Excellent. So Bill is the Federation in New Worlds, the Paravians in this game, and Bill has, shall we say, quite the experience with Federation Empire. Never the 4X version that we're playing right now, but my sort of impression is that Bill is a fast learner. So he's learned from his sort of lessons from testing, prototyping, you might say, his strategy in New Worlds, and I think is going to accelerate fast into the Void. So watch out for Bill Linton. Eugene, do Briar Patches damage ships? Did the Paravians lose a ship there? Will bigger ships also be damaged? We'll have to see. Jim says, so Badlands, Briar Patches, are crippling 2 ships in the W era on a 3 to 6 on a D6 roll. Y era ships is a 4 to 6, M era is a 5 to 6, and GW era crippled only on a 6. So that's interesting that you could actually transit those Briar Patches the more advanced your ships are, although there is a chance for crippling. Interesting. And then Jim beating himself up, no bases again, yada, yada, yada. You Can't Be Petty says, just a little lag for a few seconds. Yeah, I don't know what that's all about. I'm sorry. I will say I was having a little bit of technical issues with, which is why I was so unsettled or sort of not in the groove when we went live. I was having a lot of technical problems with vMix. Kept crashing for some reason. So we'll figure that out as we go forward. But hopefully this live stream, it would seem, is nice and smooth. Previously in previous live streams, we had a little bit of stutterness, but I seem to have resolved that issue as I'm currently running a very effective 82% GPU memory, and render times are staying in the single digits, which is critical to that smooth picture quality. Jim Howard, the counter for the SKB has changed between modules from a correct 1 to 4 counter to an incorrect, to a 2-5 incorrect one. So that would mean that the 2-5 is not the correct attack and defense factor for that ship, and rather it should be a 1-4. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I could see that as it's an S era ship. We'll have to go over that, and we'll have to see what that looks like. One of the things, actually, I'll discuss this at the end, but a strategy for making improvements on the modules going forward. So we'll talk about that. Here we go. Lord Lawless. Romulan light cruisers are flexible, can be converted into lots of useful ships, tugs, troops, etc. Big Slow Target says also large clouds of rapidly spreading plasma, depending on what you are trying to achieve. Large cloud. Oh, of course, of course. I like the cheekiness there. Big Slow Target. Very nice. All right. So let's roll into the beginnings of the. Oh, yes. Okay. So let's. I'm going to take a moment here as we are talking. I'm going to close out a couple of these. These other player maps so I can open up the Space Dwarves, the ISC. All right. So let's, all right, what do we got here? We got the Romulans, close those guys out. And all right, so interesting to note, I'm going to show you turn 5, turn 7, and turn 8 of the ISC, which is the faction I'm playing in Into the Void. And whereas the ISC normally stands for the Interstellar Concordium, which is basically another Federation type faction in another Federation type faction in the Starfleet universe. In this game, the Interstellar Concordium is the Iron Seed Coalition, which is sort of like related to my I think I accidentally no okay, here we go. So that's related to my sort of Space Dwarf interpretation of this faction. Now, when we look at this map, you're going to notice a couple of like glitches graphically, and that's because of the sort of the evolution of the module as we were building it. So just as a sort of an FYI, you'll see that as we go here. So we got turn. Let's just maximize these. When I was opening up too many maps, I was getting my vmix crashing, so that's why I had to sort of do it in stages here. So we've got, this looks like this is turn 5, that's turn 7, and that's turn 8. Okay, so let's start off with turn 5, and we'll slide right in. So this is the Iron Seed Coalition and Space Dwarves. So my Space Dwarves are inherently motivated, inspired by Tolkien's Dwarves, and concurrently the squats of Warhammer 40k. So if you think about it this way, Warhammer 40k is Warhammer in space. When you think of Warhammer fantasy anyway, the dwarves are very similar or have a lot of sort of similarities to the Durin folk of Tolkien's world. Tolkien, let's go back to the screen while we're talking about this. So Durin's folk in Tolkien's world are very moody. They tend to be quite battle savvy, and they're very sort of focused around the mining aspect of their persona. Dwarves are, in Tolkien's world, they are the creation of the Maiar, not the Maiar, the Valar, the Tolkien's god pantheon. There's one for crafting and mining and things like that, and so he created the dwarves, and those Durin's folk, the dwarves in Tolkien's world, are big on mining, crafting, and engineering. And so I thought that was an applicable and appropriate sort of characterization of the ISC, because the ISC ships, being plasma-based ships, tend to be quite beefy, quite robust, expensive to build, but man, do they carry a punch. And we see that in the New World campaign. They are quite potent ships. So I thought that would be a great sort of persona to apply to the ISC. Now, in Durin's folk, you'll notice there's a lot of last names that are associated with mining and the earth and the minerals that they find. So in order to make the acronym fit, the Iron Seed Coalition relates to the sort of the history of the Iron Seed in this Into the Void. And so they are basically a civilization of dwarves that grew up and sort of came to maturity very much the way that you see Tolkien's dwarves in the Tolkien universe, which is they live in mountains. They spend their time sort of fostering and creating these internal ecosystems within the body of the planet that they live on. They don't care so much about the surface. They're more invested in the subterranean environment. And as you saw, and although you may not enjoy the Rings of Power series that is currently out there, does a great depiction, a visual depiction of the inside of Khazad-dûm during its peak. And in that environment, you see like waterfalls and ecosystems and plants and various other things. And so that is sort of the mindset or the motivation and inspiration for the Iron Seed in this game. So we have a civilization that has come of age within the industrial and sort of ecosystem of inside these mountains. And so they have reached a point in their progression where they have started to venture out into the stars, seeing the stars not only as the sparks of light, the aspirational motivation for what they do and the gods in their pantheon, but rather they look at them as resources to be harvested. Whether it be the plasma gas or the mineral resources or what they can go out there and they can capture. And so there is this very economic sort of industrialized perspective of their space exploration that is going forward as we march forward. Now, in the very much in the spirit of sort of perhaps the Warhammer-esque, and you see this also in Tolkien, there is a warrior spirit within the dwarves of these fantasy worlds, and very much so in this as well. And so in this interpretation, I'm trying to bring in a little bit of we'll call it's not quite cyberpunk, but definitely the industrial grunginess of the squats that you see in Warhammer 40K. So we're talking like cigar chomping, grimy, dirty kind of down to earth kind of vocabulary, mindset, attitude around what it is they do, combined with the artistry and sort of pursuit of perfection when it comes to engineering and industrial manufacturing. So that's sort of the motivation, if that makes sense, around what it is that's coming forth in the Iron Seed of the Space Dwarves of Into the Void. So with that said, let's slide into the map. And away we go. All right, so you can see these little white boxes. That's a carryover from the module hiccups or the evolution of our module, and you'll see those disappear in the last map that I'll show you. But this is turn 5 in the progression. So we saw some of the other factions that we were looking at between turn 5 and turn 9. So let's take a quick look here. We'll look at EP and fleet cap. So you can see fleet cap at this early stage. We can see the ISC have 3 ship equivalents with a 9-24, 9 attack, 24 defense split. And they've come across some Orions who also have 2 ships. The ISC currently have 46. That can't be right. So I'm seeing 46 on this sheet, which would be incorrect. So let's do a manual assessment as we go. Silly. Okay, so let's look at the capital. Oh, well, that's why, because none of the planets are in the capital. That's why. But we can see that if we know that the capital system will have a capital planet, a developing planet, and several colonies, then we know that there's most likely a 16 EP base on the home system. Yeah. And so what we can see here is that we have 3 resources, or rather 2 resources and a minor resource that have been discovered. So let's take away the ships real quick. So 2 resources, what looks like, and I believe this is a half resource, and then it'll show me here. So we can see, oh, that's fleet cap, excuse me. We'll go to EP. And so we can see we got 1 colony, 1 developing, 1 planet, which would be, I guess, the colony, and a half resource. So these are, this is all out of whack. Absolutely, totally out of whack. So we have 2 resources, a half resource, and a colony. So that's 1, 2, 3.5 EP on top of the 16, which should be in our base system. So that puts me at a 19.5 EP for this, based on that initial assessment, if I have that math right. So we bring up the ships. So what we can see here in the exploration fleets, let's pull up the ISC. Where are you, my friends? There we are, ISC. So we have the ISC exploration fleets. So we can see here we've got large exploration freighters and escorted by their assault freighter counterparts. And what we can see here is that there is a 3rd exploration fleet which has lost one of its exploration freighters. So Eugene had asked earlier that there had been a rumor that there was an encounter with the Orions, and that they had captured one of our exploration freighters. And that's true. These Orions have confiscated, or rather impounded, the large exploration freighter here. So they've done that, and we had a little bit of an exchange back and forth. And basically they were demanding a return of... they were demanding money in exchange for that ship. Now, I believe, if memory serves, just because I can't, it was quite some time ago that this roleplay went down. So I think the exchange was something along the lines of, we want 6 EP for that ship, or something along those lines, which in the grand scheme of things is ridiculously expensive. So in response to that, I sent out a little, and you might have seen, for those of you who are part of the Discord, we had a little bit of the roleplay happening in the Into the Void narrative. And so that existed there. But I'll share with you the interaction once we go forward here into the next turn. So this is turn 7, and as you can see, there's some continuing exploration happening here. We've encountered and discovered another Orion base up here, and what's interesting about this one is that whereas the first one had 2 ships, that's right, 2 with 2 fingers, this one has 3 ships, 2 frigates and a destroyer surrounding that base. You can see here, of course, there are now still two ships at the Orion base just off here. And they also have a First Fleet here. So let's show you what First Fleet is. Right. So as you can see, First Fleet isn't populated there. Okay. So I will pull up I won't share with you my spreadsheet, but I'm going to go to my spreadsheet so I can reference what is there. And it'll take me a second to find it. So in turn 7, I have, as I'm looking here, in turn 7, I have, oh, okay, so this will have to be a discussion that the GM and I have afterwards. But with the ships not properly annotated in the map or on the spreadsheet, then it is very difficult to be able to identify how many ships are supposed to be on the map. Now, looking at my expenditure of what I've built, I'm going to have to think about or map this out on the fly. I can tell you that that's a YFEL. That's a YFEL. So there should be, there were 2 frigates built, then 2 frigates and a WCA. So that's a total of 4 frigates and a WCA. Then a 5th frigate, and then another WCA and 2 frigates. So that's 7 frigates and 2 cruisers were built in First Fleet and sent to that hex. 2 cruisers, 7 frigates, right? And so as a result of that interaction, we had this little role play. So let me read it to you as we go. Captain, sensors are detecting a small task force of ships. I'm showing a light cruiser and an escort frigate. These are the Orions at the base. Leaning towards the display, the Dwarven Lord shifted his warhammer to lean on his shoulder. The artisan weapon had been crafted as a mantle of office, representing the military industrial might of the Iron Seed and might to be welded against those who would steal from his kin. Do they have our freighter? Aye, Lord, I'm detecting it on the far side of the base station. I'm showing minimal power levels. Must be at anchor. The whispers of Blackvein lurked in the shadows of his thoughts. The itch for action was there, but the strategic advantage of securing the return of the freighter was a greater prize. Open a channel to their lead ship. Channel open, Lord. Kodiak Mining Corporation, this is Hertug Ironseed of the Ironseed clan. You have illegally detained and interfered with our survey and exploration team. If I understand correctly, our set and ship are currently impounded, and you are demanding a substantial sum for their return. Taking a moment to snap his butane lighter open and reignite the stale stim stick in the corner of his mouth, the Hertug continued. As you can see, I have a tidy sum of phasers and plasma torpedoes ready to send into the holds of your ships. They may have an explosive reaction. Taking a moment to heave his hammer over his shoulder, the Hertug took a long draw on the stubby stim stick. As he exhaled, he looked thoughtfully at the view screen. I'm inclined to pay in plasma, but you are the first mining corporation that we have encountered amongst the vastness of space. So, chewing on his stim stick, perhaps we can come to another arrangement. Exhaling the stimulant-laden cloud over his head, the Hertug rested his warhammer on the deck with a thud. What do you want to do? Parley or plasma? The video channel of the Kodiak mining channel opens to show a dingy, cramped bridge. Very cramped, in fact. The perspective shifts, and the viewer realizes that the crew are enormous hexapods already in environmental suits. Is it battle readiness or a habit? The great ursine bear face leans into the viewer. This is Foreman Dome of the Kodiak mining vessel, Flume. Your ship has rightfully been detained for various infractions, including trespassing and being under height to operate heavy machinery. Domai tips his head to the side, bringing into better view the second set of eyes. Your crew also appears a little under high. Nonetheless, we are willing to accept payment of fines in whatever goods you are able to provide. Plasma weaponry is acceptable. Before you get too clever, let it be known we have been using the holds of your ship for ore refining, a particularly unstable ore. High energy discharges are likely to destroy your valued ship and crew. In terms of other arrangements, Domai's mouth slips open, showing an enormous maw of multi-road teeth. Gambling is a passion for our crews. What do you say? Double or nothing? With a grin and a swipe of his foot, the Dwarven Lord swings his warhammer up. You just made it easy for me, ugly. Plasma it is. Cutting comms with the pirates, the stubble-headed dwarf keyed his command chair and opened a channel to the fleet. Okay, boys, let 'em have it. Looks like there's some kind of big furry thing. The captain that can bring me one of their hides as a cloak gets dibs on the mining rights for this sector. Here we go! Targeting the formation of Orion ships, a coordinated volley of plasma sparked to life, raining celestial fire down on the Kodiak vessels. So with that said, that's the roleplay that led into the attack. I still have not received the results of that battle, and so don't know what to tell you about the outcome of that encounter. I will say that this is the turn 8 turn that I got back, and I know that there was a misallocation of ships in the battle, so we needed to sort that out. But we can see in ISC First Fleet, oh, look at that. We got some ships there. So we can see here we got 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We got 6 frigates and 2 WCAs. So the issue that had gone on in the battle is that, so the battle had occurred and been resolved before I had even submitted my battle orders. And one of the things about, as many of you may experience, those of you who are players, there is an advantage to crippling ships and then repairing them as opposed to having them be destroyed. And in the battle, one of my frigates, I believe 2 of them frigates, were destroyed. And so I would have preferred to cripple more ships than have any of them destroyed. And so that was one of the issues that came up. But if we look at this as the way it is, you can see that these ship icons look rather interesting as far as the depiction of the picture of the ship. So we got 2 cruisers, 6 frigates still in effect, and then, of course, the rest of the exploration ships. We have a WFF that's crippled, seems to be slightly in the fog of war. And then, of course, we have this other Orion base up here with a number of ships up there. So let's take a look maybe in this map. The capital, yeah, the capital has stuff here. Let's take a quick look if EP and fleet cap are correct. So ISC is showing 19.5 EP on turn 8, so that's one of the higher EP incomes at this point in the game. And if we look at fleet cap, we can see that the ISC, and I believe this number should be a little different, but at the moment we're showing 8 ship equivalents, which essentially is all of First Fleet. We have a 21 attack, 21 attack, 40 defense, and of course the Orions are still a faction out there. They have a number of ships as well. So that's the Space Dwarves. Hopefully you enjoyed my terrible accents, providing some sense of color to the role play. And let's roll into the chat and see what you thought of that interesting color as I try and find my cursor here. Okay. Whoa, what do we got here? Okay, so let's pick up where we were. Eugene, will the ISC name a ship after the great philosopher Fred Flintstone? Interesting. You can't be petty laughs at that. Ever the Joker, Gene. Yes, got some bad reports in previous module. The planets are to laugh out loud. Face, meat, egg, Jim says. Okay, Jim, I must take this opportunity to thank profusely Kevin and the Klingon player for helping to make the Vassal module. It may not seem like it, but there are over 400 hours of discussions and changes that have been made since the module used in New Worlds. Yes. So that not only is this module have substantial changes, but we have another sort of upgrade to the module as well that's sort of in the process of being worked out right now, which takes all of the stuff that's going on in this module, streamlines it, makes it more user effective and efficient, and there's a whole bunch of stuff there too. So we'll talk about that in a future episode, but that's coming in and will be play tested in a demo, hopefully next week at some point for our community on Discord. Jim, and thanks also to Norman for discovering and fixing some problems with the back-end reporting. And Norman is the one working on that 3rd iteration, or like that other version, streamlined version of the module. So very interesting to see how that works out. Jim, as seen, I think the back-end reporting problem may have been at fault, or I may have been fully able to say it was probably me. But yeah, so I mean, just the way that sort of the map management stuff is going on, it's just challenging, very cumbersome. But hopefully we're getting to a point with the evolution of the module where it's all streamlined and not too much of a drain on time and resources. Bill Linton, awesome RP, Tony. Thank you very much. What are your plans, thoughts that destroyed Orion bases will return as hidden somewhere someday? Well, Eugene, if that is the case, then we will track them down and destroy the buggers. Because, I mean, you know, can't have those pirates doing what they do. If memory serves, I think Jim has a mechanism for sort of bases, Orion bases coming back in some way, shape, or form, and then sort of how that goes forward. To be fair, there was negotiation with the Orions to sort of come out with an option, a productive option. But Dave Brewster, who is playing, sort of role-playing the pirates, went the direction that you saw in that document. So what happened was I wrote the first part. He wrote the second part, and I wrote the third part. So basically, his side, my side, or sorry, my side, his side, and my side again. So that's how that sort of worked out, and it was great how we went back and forth using the Google Sheet to do that. And of course, we were able to go back to it and see it. And I was able to read it here for you today. So that's fantastic. Really enjoyed doing that role play with Dave, and looking forward to doing more stuff like that as this campaign rolls on. I really got to say, I enjoy the Space Dwarves as a sort of a character and a persona to drive forward. It'll be very interesting to see, because of course in the New Worlds campaign, it's a totally different persona. It's the Alpha Legion and Klingons, and there's a whole thing about that. And there's a sort of like a different mentality. This is very much sort of economically driven, right? It's all about the mining resources, and you stole from us. And I mean, hey, how many dwarven characters have we seen in Tolkien specifically where you steal from them or you take something of value of theirs and they freak out? Yeah, we've seen that more than a couple times. So very interesting to see how that sort of role playing is coming out in Into the Void. So really, really cool. Okay, Eugene says, what are your plans, thoughts? 2 Orion bases? I thought that your luck was better than mine. Are the Orions independent or members of the 3 factions that inhabit the void space? Je ne sais pas, mon ami. I don't know, but I'll certainly be finding out. There'll be more once my turns start to progress a little bit more here. I'll have more role play opportunities with the other Orion base and kind of see how that goes. But as of right now, we'll just have to see. My exploration has been kind of spotty. I mean, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 total hexes explored, which isn't terrible. That's pretty good. But just based on what I've got on the go here, I would like to have more, because I'm like that. We'll see how that goes going forward. But nonetheless, based on what we've seen, and of course there's other factions that are playing as we roll forward here. It's all exciting as we move this game forward. So, with that said, that was the Iron Seed clan or coalition in this campaign, Into the Void. What did you think? Do you like the persona of, or do you think there is a compatibility between Durin's folk and Star Trek? Do you think that Warhammer 40K squats can play it out in a world of utopian fiction that is Star Trek? Do you think that space battles, in the way that we're depicting them, make sense? If you think about Warhammer 40K and sort of so Warhammer 40K has this sort of ships of the line model of ships, which is very much like guns along the side of the ship. They come alongside and they unload. And combine that with this sort of torpedo model of like submarine warfare, versus what we have in Star Trek, which is very much the destroyer, cruiser, World War II era interaction, which is detect you at range, fire big guns, or kind of what we do today in modern warfare, which is we fire missile systems and various kind of weapons like that at our opponents. Guided missile systems that come at you from weird angles and things like that. That effectively is like a plasma weapon or a torpedo, photon torpedo, and things like that, versus the direct gunnery of phasers, or as is in World War II, direct upper deck guns. So very interesting to sort of see how that evolves going forward. What do you think? Do you think Durin's folk have a place, or could have a place, in Star Trek? Do you think that dwarves and the mentality of that sort of mineral mining, we'll call it economic industry perspective, has a niche in this kind of 4X environment? How do you think it compares to our New Worlds campaign and what the Klingons have been doing in that, as I play the Klingons in that? What are your thoughts? What faction would you want to play if you're playing in this campaign? And for those of you who are interested in the campaigns of the future, let me quickly address that right here, right now. So we currently have a community of players here, and that's the whole point of this YouTube channel, is to build a community of players and interest around the strategic level gameplay that we play in Federation Empire. Federation Empire originally set out as very much an Axis and Allies kind of game, where you have set sides and you're playing out what they call the Great War scenario, which is basically World War II. I mean, it's World War II in space. So you have the Federations, there's the Klingons and the Romulans and some other factions and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of dynamics that go on there. what we've done here is we've taken that same model and the rule set around Federation Empire, and we've applied it to a 4X version of that same mentality. And there are some aspects to the Federation Empire rule set that sort of allow for a little bit of 4X gameplay, but we've really sort of taken it to the next level in the context of this game. So we currently have a community of players that play. There's what I refer to as the OG group, which is where I sort of first was introduced to this. And I was actually talking to the GM. We were having coffee yesterday and realized that it was 6 years ago that we started doing this, which is crazy to think about that it was that long ago that we started playing the first game. And these games go a long time. Like they go a year or more sometimes. And so, yeah, the New Worlds campaign, by example, we're only in the middle of the game and we're coming up on a year anniversary on that campaign. And I see that going definitely well into sort of the 18-month range, which is very interesting. It's all about the speed of execution as far as those turns go, but we'll see how that goes. So the community of players that we have, there's the OG group, which still does their own stuff, and they have their own campaign, run by the GM, the OG GM, who is currently the Tholian player in our New Worlds campaign. And then we have the New Worlds campaign running. Of course, we have Into the Void, which we just went over. And then we have more campaigns of interest in the future. Now, Bill Linton, as part of our community here. Carl, them language, man. YouTube's not liking that. Those effing squats. Yeah, you can't say that in the YouTube chat. They don't like that. So we have, oh dear, I lost my track of thought here. Okay. So we have, Bill Linton, who's looking to create a campaign at some point around the new year. But we have a lot of work to do on the module to make sure that's sort of smooth running. Because as you can see, we've experienced some challenges and some problems with the module because we're trying to add new features and functionality into the Vassal module to be able to play this game going forward, which is, unfortunately for Jim's campaign, is kind of the test bed for that, which is why we're experiencing some challenges. So, but with that said, we're now sort of into a bit of a groove with Into the Void, and we're picking up the pace, which is good. So we'll pick up the pace and we'll kick into our cadence for Into the Void, and you'll probably see regular turn updates on Into the Void as we go forward. But there's at least 2 other individuals who are looking to potentially start a campaign in the future, which means that we could potentially have as many as 2 other campaigns running. So in order to do that, not only do we have to have a talented group of individuals who want to take on the burden of being a GM, because it's a lot of work, as our GMs can attest, to be able to monitor, process, and pump out those turns on at least a weekly cadence. It's a lot. And so if you're going to be a GM and taking on that responsibility, you need to be able to sort of be aware that that's sort of like the commitment you're getting yourself into. And as players, of course, we want to be able to have a fun and engaging game and sort of have that constant addiction, as Chappelle would say, it's just, I just need a little something. So like that sort of anxiety, anticipation, that wanting the next turn becomes a really sort of fun and exciting element of the game, as opposed to real-time strategy where you're playing it in real time and you're getting your fix right then and there. There's the delayed gratification of submitting your turn and waiting for it to come back. And while that may sound not as much fun, I can tell you from experience, and folks in this community can share, it's addictive and fun when you get the turn and you get the reveal. It's like opening up presents at Christmas. It's exciting. And then, of course, as you walk this forward and you are successful and you explore and you expand and you build out your empire, at least in that first spurt of growth, it's very sort of rewarding as you're being successful, because you really don't have a lot of opposition. It's when you start interacting with the other players and you start, having those conflicts, however you want to resolve them, TDK options or otherwise, that's where the real flavor of the game comes out. And then, of course, the reasons why our turns take so long is because you need that time and bandwidth to be able to have those interactions and conversations via email or however you want to do it. On Discord, by example, we do that as well. You can have those interactions with those other players and flush that out. So what do we have on the horizon? We have at least 1 new campaign coming around the new year, and potentially another campaign on top of that. So if you're interested and you like things, Federation Empire, you like this game, and you want to be involved in the next campaign or one of the next campaigns that are coming, then please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel. You have alerts on so you can see when these videos come out. As with Into the Void, we will be putting out a recruitment video, like a trailer, that will notify you of when those campaigns go live for recruitment. And to give you context, our Into the Void campaign is the largest campaign we've run, and it filled up in 48 hours. Within 48 hours, we had enough input or enough answering from the survey for us to fill up the campaign. Now, with that said, of course, anyone who is a patron on Patreon or a supporter here on Coffee, you get first dibs to be able to be in the new campaign. So if you're a Coffee supporter and or a patron on Patreon, then you get first dibs to be able to get a faction in the new campaign, and of course be included in those campaigns. Depending on the amount of demand or how many people want to be able to play, we may not be able to get you in both campaigns if you have bandwidth for that, maybe only one or the other, but we'll have to see how that goes going forward. Will there be one? Will there be two? Who knows? Maybe there'll be more. Maybe New Worlds will end abruptly because, the Klingons go on the warpath. Who knows what's going to happen in those campaigns? But as campaigns roll out, you can expect that over the course of a year, there will be multiple campaign rollouts over the course of 12 months, and then you'll have the opportunity to be able to participate in those campaigns. So with that said, let's round out the chat. Let's see, what do we got here? Ooh. All right, Bill Smith, sure, 40K squats, Volan. Carl, of course, his colorful commentary, and then they just won't stay dead. Daniel, you back yet? Bill says, oh, Carl, sorry, YouTube, it's my fault. Blame me, not the streamer. Jim, it's also a lot of fun being a GM. Carl, I'm thinking about it. I have a lot of free time, after all. The Klingon Exploration Fleet 2 is famous for failure to explore. He smiles. Devin Dean. Yeah, Devin Dean, our most recent subscriber, would consider being a GM, but want to get at least one play in first. Yes, there's as I was discussing with our OGGM, there's a lot of stuff that you need to consider as far as the rules and the context and sort of the decisions that are being made about how you're going to run that campaign going forward. And to be fair, every GM is going to run their campaign their way, but we want, as a community, we want there to be a consistent thread, or we'll say, well, not like a standard, but a certain level of consistency so that any player can go to any campaign and enjoy playing in that campaign. Like if you are playing D&D or Pathfinder, whatever it is, and you go off and play those games, like you can be a D&D player in campaign 1 and go off and do campaign 2 and whatever that is. You can enjoy those campaigns and play them no problem because you're basing it all on the same rule set. The decisions are fundamentally the same. You have the same expectations of outcome. The only difference is sort of the gray area on the edges. But the core rule set, the core experience, how the mechanics of the game work is all the same. It's just the flavor that might be a little bit different. And so from that perspective, it's important to have that experience as a player and then to be able to sort of map that forward as a potential GM. So, yeah. Devin Dean, of course, consider being a GM. We need to get the play in first. Big Slow Target. The value of submitting a turn a week is that you have time to plot, to plan, and to develop a strategy. You can talk about it, argue about it, make it more than a click fest or time-bounded game. I couldn't have said it any better myself. Eugene, New Worlds may with a Juggy victory because the strife of the empires is going to give the Juggies a chance to wipe out the players one at a time. All at once and with little effort. Fight them, Eugene says. Well, we'll have to see what that looks like next week, because in next week's live stream, you're going to see Daniel is back from his fanciful vacation time. We're going to see the turn reveal of what's going on in the beginning of phase 3 of the Klingon campaign against the Carnivons. We're going to get to see and we'll reveal what your comments were about how we should move forward in that campaign. And of course, there's so much more happening on that map. The Federation and The Lyrans are attacking the Remans. The Remans and the ISC are polishing up the Hydrons. The Tholians are doing a little bit of business, and maybe the Gorn and the Romulans have something to say about it. We will have to see how all of that factors into the combined Juggy campaign that Eugene references and what the Juggies have to say about it. You will only know if you tune in next week. And I say on Saturday at 11 o'clock, you will join us on our live stream. You'll get to see all that exciting and delighting stuff. And we'll maybe get to talk about a little bit of Into the Void, or maybe we'll have to set up our own live stream or a separate live stream for Into the Void. Who knows? We'll just have to make sure that we have a steady flow of turns to be able to support the need of the stream, so to speak. So anyways, we'll see how that goes going forward. But if you, again, are interested in all this stuff, then please consider being like our latest subscriber, Devin Dean. Help us get to that 500 subscriber count. And of course, hit the alerts so that you know when these videos go live and see what's going on. If you haven't already had a chance, then please check out that Step 1, Step 2, Step 3 video about the Klingon campaign against the Carnarvon. And you tell me what it is that you want to see as the next strategy going forward as the Carnies defend their homeworld and the Klingons try and conquer the Carnarvon. So with all that being said, thank you so much. I look forward to next week, and I will see you next Saturday. Bye for now.